What's up, Euro Football Daily? Today we're counting down 10 clubs that came back from the dead. Let's go. 10. Granada. Before their recent successes, Granada spent a number of years in the footballing wilderness. Having reached the Copa del Rey final in 1959 and finishing as high as 6th in the Primera Division during the early 70s, El Grana dropped out of the Spanish top flight in 1976 and for 21 years between 1989 and 2010, languished in the 3rd and 4th tiers of Spanish football. In 2002, they were forcibly relegated from the Segunda Division B to the regional Tercera Division due to rising debts, and for a number of seasons played against sides like Almeria's reserves and Antequera, who at the time had existed for just 10 years. The club remained in financial turmoil before being saved by Udinese owner Gianpaolo Pozzo in 2009, and his investment saw the club achieve consecutive promotions, returning to the top flight in 2011 after a 35-year absence. His sale of the club to John Jang in 2016 initially spelled disaster, with the new owner getting through 4 managers in his first campaign, culminating in the seemingly comical appointment of Tony Adams and a bottom place finish. However, Adams then helped him devise a plan to boost the club's identity by hiring Andalusian talent. Within a year, they'd appointed Diego Martinez, who had cut his teeth coaching in the Sevilla setup, and by 2019 led them back to La Liga, where they achieved a 7th place finish above Valencia and Athletic Bilbao. They are now playing in Europe for the first time in their history. 9. AC Milan. Unlike Granada and many others on this list, Milan have never suffered a prolonged period out of the top flight, but having won the European Cup 5 times between 1989 and 2007, their continued failure to qualify for the Champions League after 2013 has represented a crisis for the club. They finished higher than 6th in Serie A just once during this period, hired 9 different managers across 7 campaigns, and built up massive debts from overspending on average players and failing to qualify for Europe. Long-time owner Silvio Berlusconi sold up in 2017, and new owner Lee Yong-hong was unable to repay the loans his consortium had used to fund the buyout, with the US hedge fund Elliott Management announcing its takeover in the summer of 2018. It seemed like Milan were destined to forever languish in mid-table. But while this latest development was met with apprehension from fans and pundits alike, the club has improved since then, with debts dropping and results on the field getting much better. At the time of recording, they sit top of Serie A, while manager Stefano Pioli has sustained a 57% win ratio, which is actually marginally better than what UCL winning coaches Ancelotti and Capello managed at the San Siro. But do you reckon Milan can keep this up? Let us know in the comments below. 8. Boavista. One of just 2 clubs outside the holy trinity of Porto, Benfica and Sporting to be crowned Portuguese champions, Boavista won their first and only league title in 2001, briefly turning the country's big 3 into a big 4. But things soon went downhill for the Porto-based club. Their domestic success and impressive showings in Europe saw the club's wage bill increase, while the building of their new stadium for Euro 2004 plunged them into debt. And to make matters worse, in 2008 they were implicated in the Apito Dorado bribery scandal. They were relegated as a result, fined €180,000 in the process, had their stadium seized by authorities, and club president João Loureiro was suspended for 4 years. A year later, they were demoted again, this time for financial reasons. But in 2014, following half a decade in the wilderness of the Portuguese 3rd tier, the Panthers were reinstated in the top flight, with Loureiro back at the helm following a court case which had overturned their previous punishment and a new deal which saw the club's debt cut in half. They may be a long way off challenging for the title again, but Boavista are back where they belong. 7. Ferencvaros. Ferencvaros' qualification for the Champions League group stage in 2020 was a remarkable achievement, and for many years it would have seemed impossible. Despite being the most successful and well-loved team in Hungary, with an estimated 20% of the country's population counting themselves as supporters, the club, also known as Fradi, hit hard times in the mid-2000s, with financial irregularities forcing them to be relegated for the first time in their 121-year history. A takeover by former Sheffield United owner Kevin McCabe ended badly, and while he oversaw the club's promotion back to the top tier, when he left in 2011, incoming CEO Paul Oros described the club being in ruins, with the stadium not up to European standards, staff going unpaid for 4 months, while electricity bills hadn't been paid either. But the new ownership reinvested heavily in the club, and a new stadium funded by the government opened in 2014. 2 years later, the side won its first league title since 2004, a feat they have since repeated twice, and in 2011 they got the ultimate reward, squad, with the UCL draw confirming that both Lionel Messi and Cristiano Ronaldo would be setting foot in Budapest. 6. Rangers. One of the most trophy-laden clubs in the world, Rangers' hold on Scottish football, along with rival Celtic, has practically never been broken. But in 2012, years of financial mismanagement came to a head. Their modern success was built on huge spending and rising debts, leading the club to avoid taxes through an alternative wage setup, and owner David Murray selling Rangers to businessman Craig White for just £1 in 2011. A year later, the historic club faced liquidation, and they commenced the following campaign in the Scottish 4th tier. As a report in The Guardian later stated, the roll call of chances and charlatans who have ruined Rangers is long, but Craig White, along with Charles Green, who he sold the club's assets to in 2012, were among the prime culprits, and were arrested in 2015 after an investigation into the sale. But the club has ploughed on since then, winning promotion back to the Scottish Premiership under Mark Warburton in 2016. With Steven Gerrard now in charge, the Gers have become genuine challengers to arch-rival Celtic once again, and this time on a sustainable budget. Just 7 years after battling it out in front of crowds of hundreds in the Scottish League 2, Rangers are a regular fixture in European competition once again. 5. LASK. Aside from a league and cup double in 1965, the history of LASK looks fairly unremarkable, despite the club representing Austria's third biggest city. But in the last 25 years, the club's very existence has been thrown into uncertainty on more than one occasion. They narrowly avoided liquidation in 1995, and just a few years later were relegated amid financial trouble caused by the bankruptcy of club president Wolfgang Rieger's bank. And after making it back to the top flight in the late 2000s, disaster struck again, as the club lost its licence to play in the top 2 divisions in 2012 and having to move 50 kilometres from their home stadium in order to cut costs. But a year later, a group of local entrepreneurs known as the Friends of LASK took over, and the club has been on the up ever since. They returned to the Austrian Bundesliga in 2017 and within 2 years had qualified for the Europa League group stage, beating Sporting Club and PSV on their way to a once-in-a-lifetime last 16 tie with Man United. Meanwhile, manager Oliver Glasner, who had overseen their rise back to the big time, followed Marco Rose and Roger Schmidt in making the leap from Austria to Germany, being hired by Wolfsburg in 2019. 4. Rapid Bucharest. With Romanian football hit hard by the financial crisis at the beginning of the 2010s, rising debts and unpaid players became commonplace, and Rapid Bucharest suffered particularly badly, filing for insolvency in 2012 before having their top-flight licence revoked 2 years later. By the summer of 2016, the club was dissolved, bringing an end to 93 years of history filled with silverware, a number of promotions and relegations, and some memorable runs in European competition. But while the fan base was initially split, with 2 separate footballing entities forming out of the ashes of Rapid, a new initiative headed by a number of former players saw another new club formed in 2017, starting out in the country's 5th tier, and Rapid's naming rights bought a year later for around €400,000. That same year, legendary forward Daniel Panku, who had rejoined the club as both a player and director as the Phoenix project got underway, played his final match at the age of 41, coinciding with Rapid's last game at their 80-year-old stadium before it was closed for redevelopment. He was then appointed coach, and while he was sacked just 18 months later, did win them their 3rd promotion in as many seasons in his first campaign. With the Romanian top flight now in touching distance and with a brand new stadium set to be opened, things are looking bright once again for fans of Rapid. 3. Leeds United. One of the most notable sleeping giants in modern football history, Leeds United famously went from making the Champions League semi-finals, beating fantastic Milan and Lazio sides on the way, to relegation and financial oblivion in the space of 3 years. Following demotion to the Championship, the club had to sell off top talents like Alan Smith and James Milner, as well as its training facility and stadium, in order to balance the books, in doing so setting back their aims of returning to the Premier League by a few years. But it would only get worse, with the Peacocks entering administration before being relegated to League One in 2007. More chaos followed under the controversial ownership of Massimo Cellino the following decade, but the club finally turned a corner after being acquired by Andrea Radrizzani in 2017. A year later, the club hired Marcelo Bielsa as manager, and the Argentinian Maverick masterminded their route back to the big time, becoming a godlike figure among fans as he did so. With further investment, it's likely we'll see Leeds playing in Europe once again in years to come. 2. Parma. A big player in Serie A during the 90s, Parma's success was bankrolled by huge investment from parent company Parmalat, with a Coppa Italia and UEFA Cup double in 1999 the peak of their achievements. But in early 2004, a financial scandal and meltdown at the multinational threatened to put the Crusaders' future at risk, and the club was declared insolvent later that year, reforming under an almost identical name and retaining its place in the Italian top flight. However, the following decade they didn't achieve such a narrow escape. In March 2015, Parma was declared bankrupt after months of staff and players going unpaid, matches being postponed, and with the club having already been sold for €1 on 2 occasions. With debts totalling over €200 million and no buyer able to take them on, administrators auctioned off the club's trophies, and they had to restart this time all the way down in Serie D. Refounded as Parma Calcio 1913, and with former manager Nevio Scala, who won 4 trophies for them in the 90s, elected as president, they achieved 3 promotions in as many seasons, becoming the first Italian side to do so, and took their place back in Serie A in 2018. In their first 2 seasons back, they've managed to stay relatively comfortable in mid-table, reviving the career of Gervinho and providing a springboard for the supremely talented Dejan Kulusevski. 1. Venezia FC. In at number 1, Venezia didn't come back once or twice, but 3 times, all in the last 20 years. Their last involvement in Serie A came back in 2002 when eccentric owner Maurizio Zamparini upped sticks to buy Palermo, where he ran a chaotic operation for the next 15 years, getting through around 40 different managers. Venezia, meanwhile, were left with a hugely depleted squad, were relegated to Serie B, and went bankrupt 2 years later. But even after reforming and being admitted into the 4th tier of Italian football, financial struggles continued, and they declared bankruptcy again in 2009. And even after being taken over by ambitious Russian tycoon Yuri Karablin in 2011, trouble was never too far away. Under his ownership, they achieved consecutive promotions and put in place plans for a new 25,000-seater stadium, something which had seemed a pipe dream for most of the club's history. But following the arrest of Venice's mayor Giorgio Orsolini on corruption charges in 2014, the club was put up for sale, and with no buyers had to file for bankruptcy for a 3rd time in a decade. But they just wouldn't die, refounding themselves as Venezia FC before being bought out by a consortium led by American lawyer Joe Tacopina in 2015. Having had experience at Roma and Bologna already, Tacopina carried out a transformation at the historic club, bringing in Filippo Inzaghi as manager and overseeing consecutive promotions to Serie B. After a lucky escape in 2019, Venezia remain in the Italian 2nd tier. So those were our 10 clubs that came back from the dead, but who would you have liked to have seen included? Let us know in the comments below, and maybe we'll do a part 2. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to leave it a like and of course subscribe to Eurofootball Daily. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.